The White House says a Russian attack on Ukraine could still happen any day, urging caution against Vladimir Putin's claims that he's drawing down some of the 130 or 150,000 military forces positioned along the border there at Ukraine. Now, President Biden said on Tuesday the U.S. would continue to give Putin every chance to pursue a diplomatic agreement, but notes that intelligence so far has not suggested that that is his intention. I want to bring in Leland Vittert, who spent several years as a correspondent in the Middle East, as well as time in Ukraine. Let's talk about this. We've talked quite often. What's the deal here? Is he drawing the troops back? Was this just a rumor to deflect from what is happening there? And is President Biden right that he's actually intensifying forces at the border?
Well, you might ask Vladimir Putin, should I believe you or my lying eyes? And at least what we've been able to see from commercial satellite pictures and what the United States and NATO allies have said is that Vladimir Putin is saying one thing and doing the other. He's saying that he is withdrawing troops when in fact he is actually increasing the number of troops and moving them closer to attack positions. And we talked yesterday, Adrienne, about the idea, was this Russia blinking or was this a head fake? And it appears to be a head fake. And you have to think about this in the larger context, which is that Russia just absolutely loves, and Vladimir Putin's an old KGB hand, so he knows how to at every moment play one side against each other, play the United States against our NATO allies, play Ukraine against the other European countries, and everything he does is calculated to figure out what our reactions are going to be. So yesterday he wanted to see, well, what exactly is the United States going to do in terms of an intelligence standpoint? What are they going to be able to figure out I'm doing? So he puts out little breadcrumbs and then see who picks them up. That gives him a sense of where leaks are within his own organization. That gives him a sense of what the Ukrainians' intelligence abilities are. And that's what we've seen happen over the past 24 hours.
I don't know how much we would know with certain levels of intelligence, but is there any way to know where NATO allies or the U.S. are getting their information about this?
Well, if they're not going to tell us where they're getting their information. Obviously, you have three ways of getting sensitive information. You have human intelligence, that's spies, people with inside the Russian military or the Russian intelligence community telling members of the U.S. intelligence committee what's going on. Vladimir Putin's inner circle is notoriously difficult to penetrate. So there you have that. You have signals intelligence, that would be intercepted communications. And that obviously is notoriously difficult to tell what's real information, what you're actually hearing, and what the Russians want you to hear. And that's sort of the real art in this, right? Of figuring out when you hear an order go out to Russian troops to move closer to the border, is that because they're actually supposed to move closer to the border? Or is that because the Russians are testing to figure out if they're moving closer to the border? And then the last one would be satellite images, which is pictures don't lie. We have the commercial satellite images of pictures of Russian fighter jets moving towards Crimea and into Belarus so that they would be in attack positions. Russian military helicopters moving into Crimea, which is the Russian-controlled part of Ukraine that they took back in 2014. That would be ready for an attack moving north. Those pictures don't lie either. And then really at this point, you just sort of have to wait and see whether the threats made by President Biden yesterday, which were basically going after the Russian oligarchs and Putin's inner circle with sanctions was the main threat, whether that is enough to deter Vladimir Putin, who views Ukraine as his pathway to reviving the Russian motherland. Who wins in that test of wills is what we wait and find out.
It's certainly a head game. All right. Thank you so much to our Leland Vittert, as always. Your show airing tonight right here on NewsNation. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.